The world, to me, had always been a tapestry of precise lines and unwavering certainties. My name is Reid, and for 20 years, the elegant science of cartography has been the very breath in my lungs, the steady beat of my heart. Reid charted rivers that snake like silver threads, etched mountains that rose with stoic grandeur, and penned the delicate lattice of human habitation with a meticulous hand. My maps were not just guides, they were portraits of truth, each contour and coordinate a testament to verifiable reality. Then came the letter, crisp and unsettling, bearing the seal of a distant solicitor. An ancestral estate, it declared, passed down through generations, now mine. It was a place Reid had only ever heard whispered in hushed tones, a sprawling, forgotten relic tucked away in a remote valley, far from any charted course Reid knew. Curiosity, a rare beast in my ordered world, stirred within me. Reid packed my instruments, my compasses, my precise rulers, and set off, a silent pilgrimage into the unknown margins of my own lineage. The estate, when Reid finally reached it, was a tomb of forgotten grandeur. Stone walls wept moss, gables sagged like weary shoulders, and the air itself tasted of decay and damp earth. Inside, shadows clung to every corner, thick as velvet. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating the ghosts of generations. Among the family heirlooms, tucked away in a forgotten chest beneath a shroud of brittle linen, Reid found it, a map. It was not of the world Reid knew, nor of any style Reid recognized. Fashioned from thick, tanned vellum, it depicted the estate and its surrounding lands with an unnerving, almost obsessive detail. Every ancient oak, every winding stream, every rise and fall of the terrain was rendered with exquisite, almost living precision. Yet, it was unsettlingly incomplete. Vast swaths of the parchment remained blank, bordered by strange, archaic symbols that writhed like trapped serpents. There were features marked deep wells, standing stones, a structure half buried on a distant ridge that appeared on no modern survey, no deed, no historical record Reid could find. "What ghost did you chart?" Reid murmured, my fingers tracing the delicate, unsettling lines. The vellum felt cool, almost alive, beneath my touch. A shiver, not entirely from the estate's pervasive chill, traced its way up my spine. This was no ordinary map, it was an enigma, a challenge to my very profession. And a cartographer, above all else, cherishes the unraveling of mysteries. This estate, with its silent secrets and this impossible map, had begun to map itself onto the landscape of my soul. My first weeks were a dance between my professional rigor and the estate's silent resistance. I sought to impose order, to reconcile the map's cryptic etchings with the physical world. Armed with my modern instruments, GPS, laser rangefinders, a drone that hummed like an angry bee, I began my survey. The discrepancies were immediate, jarring. "Impossible," I muttered, staring at my tablet, then back at a cluster of gnarled, ancient oaks. The vellum map showed a clear, circular clearing here, complete with what appeared to be a crumbling stone altar. My drone's aerial photos, however, revealed nothing but an impenetrable thicket. It's as if the land itself has shifted, or memory has been deliberately erased. I pushed deeper, hacking through brambles that clawed at my clothes, into parts of the estate that felt untouched by human foot in centuries. Here, the map became my only reliable guide, pointing to overgrown structures not found on any modern deed. I discovered the skeletal remains of a small chapel, its roof long collapsed, its stones swallowed by ivy, exactly where the old map indicated a place of quiet reflection. Its silence was profound, almost reverent, broken only by the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. And the stone markers. They were the most perplexing. Roughly hewn monoliths, some half-buried, others leaning precariously, dotted the landscape in a pattern that defied logic or common agricultural practice. They formed no fence, no boundary, no obvious path. They simply were, silent sentinels marking nothing I understood. As I worked, the estate began to reveal itself in subtler, more unsettling ways. I'd feel a sudden drop in temperature, a prickling sensation on my skin, as if an invisible door had opened to a winter night. Old timbers, old stone. But the sounds often came from outside, from the very landscape I was trying to chart, from places that felt wrong. My cartographer's precision, once my bedrock, felt increasingly unstable, undermined by the spectral geometry of this place. The map, once a challenge, was slowly becoming an obsession, a mirror reflecting a landscape that refused to conform to the rational. The estate's presence, once a subtle hum beneath the surface, began to pulse with a low, malevolent thrum. My rationalizations, once sturdy pillars, began to crack and crumble. It was like trying to grasp smoke. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the damp earth outside, from the spaces between my thoughts. They were unintelligible at first, a sibilant murmur, like dry leaves skittering across stone. But with each passing day, they grew clearer, closer. He watches, one seemed to hiss. You are here now, another rasped, a sound like gravel churning. Who watches? Reid demanded of the empty air, my voice hoarse. Objects, too, began to subtly rearrange themselves. A pen Reid had placed carefully beside a journal would reappear on the other side of the room, or even in a drawer Reid knew Reid had closed. It was a petty malice, a child's game, but it chipped away at my sanity. Sleep offered no refuge. My nights were plagued by vivid, unsettling nightmares. Reid dreamed of endless, echoing corridors beneath the earth, of the estate's roots coiling like serpents around something vast and ancient. Reid dreamed of faces, indistinct and terrifying, peering from behind the standing stones. The map itself, my anchor in this swirling chaos, seemed to subtly change. Reid'd pore over its lines, convinced Reid knew every symbol, every incomplete section. But then, a new line would appear, faint as a spider's silk, connecting two previously disparate points. Once, Reid swore Reid saw a faint, red stain bloom across one of the blank sections, like blood seeping through ancient parchment, only for it to vanish the moment Reid reached for it. Is this isolation, or something else? The precise cartographer in me screamed for logic, for reason, for a definitive explanation. The map was no longer just an object, it was a living, breathing thing, slowly revealing a truth too terrible to comprehend. A desperate need for answers gnawed at me, a hunger more primal than any Reid had known. Reid abandoned my survey, trading my GPS for dusty ledgers, my drone for brittle, yellow journals. The estate held its history in its bones, and Reid was determined to excavate it. Reid delved into the forgotten library, a cavernous room choked with the smell of mildew and decaying paper. Reid unearthed old family journals, their leather bindings cracked, their pages filled with faded, spidery script. They told a grim tale, a tapestry woven with madness, disappearances, and strange occurrences, a pattern stretching back centuries, always tied to the land, always centered around specific locations marked on my map. The blight on the house. It spreads from the soil. From the deep places, one entry read, dated 1789, penned by a distant ancestor whose handwriting grew increasingly erratic towards the end. They demand. They hunger. Another, from 1852, my brother, Elias, vanished by the standing stones. The villagers speak of the hungry earth, of things that stir beneath. The map. It shows a path, but to what? To salvation or damnation? The hungry earth. The deep places. Reid murmured, tracing the words with a trembling finger. It's not just a map of the land, is it? It's a map of a prison. The blank spaces on the vellum, the ones bordered by those serpentine symbols, corresponded precisely to the locations where the disappearances were most frequent, where the blight was said to be strongest. The symbols themselves, when Reid meticulously copied and compared them to arcane texts Reid found in the library, hinted at wards, at bindings, at something meant to contain. This is a key. A key to something malevolent, something buried, something that has been stirring for centuries. My identity as a cartographer, once a source of pride, now felt like a cruel joke. Reid was no longer charting the known world, Reid was charting the unknown, mapping the very contours of an ancient evil. The supernatural activity escalated dramatically, shedding its subtle veil and embracing a terrifying, aggressive clarity. Your blood remembers. Your blood calls. No! Reid screamed, clutching my head, spinning to face the unseen tormentor. Leave me be. But it laughed, a dry, rattling sound like bones dancing on stone. We are already here, little cartographer. We are the land. We are your legacy. Visions plagued me even while awake. Reid'd be studying the map, and the parchment would ripple, showing me grotesque, shifting forms beneath the earth, vast and ancient, their tendrils reaching, grasping. In the kitchen, preparing a meager meal, the utensils would clatter and spin, knives hovering in the air before crashing to the floor with a deafening clang. One evening, a heavy oak table in the dining room slid several feet across the polished floor, scraping a raw gouge into the wood, as if pushed by an unseen, titanic hand. The apparitions began. They were projections of the entity, Reid knew, designed to break my will, to strip away my last vestiges of sanity. My attempts to communicate with the outside world became futile, then terrifying. My mobile phone, once a lifeline, became a dead weight. Hello? Is anyone there? Reid'd plead, my voice cracking, holding the phone aloft like a desperate prayer. Reid! Come home, the distorted voice would rasp, a mockery of human speech. My internet connection flickered, then died, severing my last link to the world of reason. The isolation was no longer a quiet companion, it was a terrifying, suffocating shroud. Reid was utterly alone, save for the entity and the ghosts of my lineage, trapped within a landscape that breathed menace, waiting for me to break. My precise lines, my certainties, had dissolved into a nightmare. The symbols, the blank spaces, the cryptic notes from the journals Reid pored over them, my eyes burning, my mind a whirlwind of fear and desperate logic. And then, a pattern emerged, a horrifying, undeniable truth. The serpentine symbols weren't decorative, they were a complex, interlocking series of wards. The blank spaces weren't incomplete, they were the seals, the places where the wards were strongest, where the entity was bound. The place of quiet reflection, the standing stones, the deep well, these were not just landmarks, but critical points in a vast, subterranean prison, a cage constructed by my ancestors, perhaps, to contain something truly ancient and malevolent. Reid found a final, hidden passage in the last journal, tucked beneath a false bottom. Asterisk the map. It is both the key and the lock. The lines, the symbols. They are the bindings. If broken, if unmade. The old one stirs. Its hunger is vast, its patience eternal. Our blood drew it here, our blood must hold it. A sacrifice. It demands a sacrifice of the bloodline to maintain the seal. Not to appease it, but to strengthen the prison. For if it breaks free, the old one, an ancient, primordial force, buried beneath the land, not cosmic in its origin, but of the very earth itself, of a time before human memory. And it was weakening. The wards, centuries old, were failing. The entity wasn't just haunting me, it was calling to me, guiding me, compelling me to complete the map, but not in the way I'd thought. Not to contain it, but to release it. Or perhaps, to be the final, terrifying sacrifice. My lineage, the very blood that flowed in my veins, was not just a connection to this estate, but a connection to the entity itself. I was drawn here, not by chance, but by design. To be the final piece in its liberation, or the ultimate offering to reseal its prison. My identity, once defined by the clarity of lines and the certainty of coordinates, was now inextricably bound to this ancient, malevolent force. The map was not a guide to treasure, but a blueprint for my own damnation. The true horror was not just what lay beneath the earth, but what lay within me, waiting to be claimed. The mall lights hummed with an artificial, relentless cheer, casting a sterile glow across the polished tile floors. Yet, the lights remained on, an endless, unblinking eye. My footsteps echoed, sharp and solitary, in the vast, empty